Okay, let's start our lesson, next lesson, which is building your first Android app. In this lesson, we're gonna build your first Android app and learn anatomy of Android app, layouts and the resources, activities, and we try to make our app interactive by adding buttons. And if time permits, we will learn about Gradle, accessibility, and summary. So let's talk about Android Studio. Android Studio is an official IDE. It's built on IntelliJ IDEA and has lots of features to make it faster and easier to develop on Android apps. They both have common shortcuts, so if you learn them, it can save lots of your time, shortcuts. And the installation instructions and formal walkthrough will be in the labs. This lecture will focus on more high-level concepts. Your first app. When you install Android Studio, it will open this page where you can create your new project, open existing, and get it from version control system like GitHub. After that, you will see this screen. By the way, let's show it. So this one. So when you click on new project, it will show a window with templates. It's okay to use empty activity for now. When you click next, it will show this screen. Here you can define your name, like hello Android or something like that. And this is package name. This is important because it's used in when you publish your app in Google Play to identify your app. So it's important to choose unique package name. This is save location. Yeah, it is default location. You can change it. This is language. This is important also. This specifies minimum SDK that you want to support. So, for example, Android has different versions like 12, 13, like 11, and if you want to support, for example, versions higher than Android 10, you can specify it like this one, and your app will be able to run approximately on 60% of devices, right? Неғұрлым жоғарыласаңдар соғұрлым саппорт жасайтын нелерің азая береді. It's good enough to specify 23, and you will be able to run on such percent of devices. So, and you will click finish. After that, it starts loading. So let's talk about IPA levels for your app. When you create Android project, there are defined 3 API levels, which is, first is minimum SDK. We talked about that. Second is version you are targeting, and third is version you use to compile your app. So what is target and the compile SDK version? To answer that, I found one great article. This is a little bit old, but this is also great. But let's see this one, which is new, right? Compile SDK version is kind of like it's like, how to say, то есть вот это он означает, какие фичи вы хотите увидеть. То есть if you want to see new features, for example, here it shows that in Android 12, there was a new feature which allows you to use built-in splash screen, right? Splash screen деген мысалы YouTube ашқанда ең бірінші шығатын не, ең бірінші YouTube деп шығады сразу. потом барып приложение ашылады да, или там Gmail деп шығады, потом барып приложение ашылады. Соны сплэш скрин деп атайды. И 12-де сендерде ол былай көрсетіп қойсаңдар, ол өзі автоматын сплэш скрин жасап беретін қылып жасады да. И соны қолданғыларың келеді, допустим. И сендер там, and you can specify like compile execution equal to 31, right? And after that, you will be able to use those API. By the way, what is API, right? API is like version of library. So if we consider Android SDK as library, and we update compile SDK version to 31, it means that you are using 31's version of that library, right? So you can use new features from there, but you can use it only in code. So in real life, it won't be shown to users because you haven't updated your target SDK version, and this is really important, right? So here it says that compile SDK version alone doesn't actually change the behavior up. This is useful to define errors, to see some errors, some warnings, right? For example, in 31's version, some old code might be deprecated, which you were using that. Okay, so you were using some old code and it was deprecated in 31's version, and it will show warnings that this was deprecated in this version. And to see them and to fix them, you can just update compile SDK version and fix them. But to actually use some new features, you need to update your target SDK version. And that's the difference between those two. You can read this in detail if you want to know more. Also, it has video grade. And let's continue our lesson. So here's a tower of Android Studio. Let me show it using Android Studio itself. Let's close it. Yeah. When you open your project for the first time, you will see such main activity file, and by clicking command or control in Windows, you can open like this file, right? This is XML file. You can also find it in res XML, not XML, res layout and activity main. So, and this is like, how is it called? Yeah, this is called layout editor, all of this. And these are sections of it. So this is called project window, this is called palette, right? And this is component tree. Here you can like drag different components to build your layout. And here you can see it's tree. So when you drag it, it will build a tree. If you use constraint layout, it will build like flat tree. If you use other layouts like linear, it can be like hierarchy, right? It can go nested. And here you can change attributes of that elements. For example, for the text view, we can specify its text, like Almaty, and it will be changed, right? So this is called layout editor, and you can run your app in Android device. Let's back and run this app on. I'm using actual device, but we can run it also on Android device. To install, you have instructions how to install emulator in your pathway. So if you just open pathway, and you will be able to install those, but I already have 3 of them installed. Что мында бірдеңе болып отыр деймін, неге келіп жатыр? Анда, кстати, attendance-ті минутпен қарауға болады екен. Так что анда егер, допустим, бір 50 минут қатысып шығып кетсеңдер, онда примерно 1 сағатқа attendance болады да. Ал егер одан көп болса, онда, то есть қанша, там минутный есептеуге болады, 90 минут болса, допустим, да, допустим, точно емес, онда 2 сағатқа болады деген сияқты, солай болады примерно. Сол үшін андай. көп шыға бермеңдер деп па. So yeah, disabled дейді. Мен мына жақта окейді баспадым ба. Мен мына жақта көрсетуім қиын болады. Сол үшін эмулятор қолданайын. 28 ба, супер ма. Run, if we click on run, it will run that app. Мен мында андай не қойып қойғам. Мында, кстати, we have such a section called developer tools, and we can like toggle this feature to see our bounds of our layouts. Later I will show it when we touch debugging. So yeah, this is our first app. If you just click on run and on emulator, it will run our first app. Here's this one where you can see list of emulators. You can also edit their name, you can cold boot them, you can delete them, right? Duplicate and so on. Anatomy of app project. Every app contains all these files. First one is activity. Basically, it handles user input and creates a window on the screen to display your interface. And second is resources, which are additional files that you use in your code, such as layout files, images, audio files, themes and colors and more. And third one is Gradle files. They are scripts that control how your app is built, and it can install your app in device, it can run tests, it can do bunch of tasks, other tasks useful. Here how this structure is located. Let's see it. By the way, there are I think we touched it here, right? There are two types of views. How you can view your project structure. First one is Android view, another is project view. I usually use project view because it reflects an actual structure of that files. So it will be exactly the same as like if you use like Pravatnik, right, in Windows, or Finder in macOS. And the Android view is it shows simplified view of your project, so it removes some files. So let's for now use project view and see structure, right? Slide yeah, so app stores your code and the tests and the resources for your app. Libs can store local libraries. Let's open slide. Yeah, so libs can store libraries that your app depends on. Android test can store code specific to Android. Main stores Java classes, Kotlin files, and the test stores files for tests. Build Gradle controls how your application builds, and the manifest XML declares essential information about your app. And the Gradle W or Gradle U, an executable, use it to run a Gradle if it's not already installed. Ну, то есть пока, если қиын болып жатса түсіну, кейін бұл тоже тоқталамыз жасағанда. So yeah, let's talk about views. Views are built-in classes. They are sometimes called widgets, and they can have subclasses, for example, text view, image view, or button, which are commonly used, right? And you can imagine views like bounded rectangle areas on screen, and they are responsible for drawing and event handling. and they can be grouped to form more complex interfaces. So yeah, they can be like multiple views when you form a complex interface. Yeah, I think we have already talked about that. XML layouts. So you can define your views using layout editor. Also, you can define them using XML layouts. Let's see how we can do that. So here we are using XML. So we can just directly write here, for example, like text equal to Almaty, and it will show Almaty. Что better? I'm emulator here. Yeah, to see it, we need to use this one, which is like preview, right? So yeah, Almaty. Also, you can modify it from here, as I said. So there are two ways modifying it. And yeah, by the way, each of these views are the Java classes. So they are built-in Java classes, and you can see their source code, but I don't recommend it because they are too long. So for example, view is also Java class, and so on. And that's a nightmare, right? For example, let's see how many lines of code view has. So it has like 31,000 lines of code, right? And I think you never will be able to understand it. So that's why there is a new library called Jetpack Compose, and it greatly simplifies the structure. And why it's too long? If you remember, I said that it's better not to use deep hierarchies, right? And view is an example of using deep hierarchies. So text view extends view, and there are other different hierarchies. View has lots of hierarchies, so that's why parent class can become such big. So that's why better not to use it. So yeah, so here's an example of text view. Let's talk about XML. Yeah, if you notice, yeah, let's talk about its syntax. These are called tags. So for example, here tag is text view, and these are called attribute names. So this is attribute name, and this is attribute value. And so for example, text view or tag text view has these attributes, right? And this defines how it behaves. Wrap content, so like this, is designed to use as much space as needed to display the content of view. So, то есть артық емес та, қанша ол контент алады, сонша space қана қолданады деген сияқты. And the match parent, it can be also match parent, and it uses dimension of its parent, and it uses its vice versa, right? So то есть parent қанша space болса ода ол сол space'тің барлығын қолданады, то есть максимум қолданады прям. For example, if you want some image to be large, you can define it, right? You can use match parent. And lastly, it can be a fixed size. So in this case, it's 48 dp. So you can also fix its size. So let's try to use it. Okay, let's use smaller value. Yeah, and it fixes it forces to fit that size, and like wraps its content, right? Yeah, if you use, for example, match parent, it like stretches and takes whole width. So view groups. To show more than one view on screen, use a view group. So view group is a container for views and it controls how views are organized and laid out on the screen. This slide shows examples of 3 different view groups. So one is frame layout, linear layout, and constraint layout. In general, uh, linear layout is used. In general, constraint layout is used to build complex layouts, but if it's possible, linear layouts works faster if you don't use weights. So it has weight parameter. If you don't use it, it works faster. But in general, we use constraint layout and the linear layout if it's too simple, and the frame layout. Frame layout is the fastest one. So, but it's as it's fastest, it's like its features also like you don't have such features, right? So we will stop on them, how to use each of them. So yeah, here's a frame layout example. Frame layout generally holds a single child view, but it can also hold multiple childs, and it uses uh, like it acts like box. So you can put your view anywhere, but each view don't know about other views. So they can overlap each other. So то есть давайте көрейік бір мысал. То есть мына жаққа frame layout қойсақ қазір. И істеу үшін мынандай зат қою керек болады үстіне. Бұны тоже бірдеме деп атайды, бірақ ол просто қою керек деп түсініңдер, ол всегда қойылу керек зат. То есть namespace деп атайды, кажется. И вот, допустим, екі текст view қойсақ, олар бір-бірін оверлап жасап кетеді қазір. Алматы десек. Бір-біріне қуаттасып кетті. И фрейм layout'та солай, мынаның бар екенін сен біле алмайсың да, мына текст view'нің ішінен. Өйткені ондай информация жоқ онда. Ол тек қана бокс сияқты, сен просто қоя аласың и қоятын жеріңді таңдай аласың, мысалы. Бүйтіп айтуға болады. Там қалай gravity, layout gravity вроде, или gravity, кажется, или bottom дейік. Bottomға кетіп қалды. То есть frame layout мынау match parent деп тұр, и сол үшін ол бүкіл нені алып тұр. И bottom дегенде, if we specify bottom, it goes to bottom. When I say in Kazakh, if you don't understand, please ask. So sometimes I can speak in Kazakh because it's difficult to speak in English every time. So height, let's specify 20 dp. So and we get this result, right? We can also combine them. Say bottom like end, and it will be here. We can, I think, specify center also. Yeah, center. And the frame layout is such type of layout, right? It's really simple, and but it can cause problems. So if you don't know size of its frame layout, it can overlap to each other because they don't know about each other. Yeah, let's continue. So next view group example is linear layout, and this is also very simple. I think we don't need to show it from Android Studio, but it has an orientation attribute which you can specify its orientation, like horizontal or vertical, and all of these childs will be like grouped using that orientation, right? Here we see that it's specified as vertical, and the childs are grouped vertically. So here's another example of linear layout, which uses both directions. So if you see here, it initially uses vertical, outer layout, linear layout uses vertical orientation, and the inner, this one, uses horizontal orientation, right? And yeah, you see that this is powerful, so you can implement more complex layouts, but it's not recommended to use deep hierarchies while defining view hierarchies too. So this can cause problems, which is called double taxation. So better to use constraint layout, one constraint layout, and define all of these views in the same level. So that's a recommendation. So if you, то есть linear layout by төмен кетіп бара жатса, хиерархия, то есть не стоит оны использовать. Өйткені ол проблемалар туындырады. Приложение жай істейтін болады. Yeah, so resources. Resource can be layout files, audio files. I think we have talked about that. Yeah, and here how it looks like. So this is called the resources folder, and it can contain other folders, which is like drawable that stores images and assets, other assets, layout that contains all layout files for your application, map, which contains app icon, or launcher icon. So do you know what's launcher icon? It's like icon, for example, when you use your Android phone, there are lots of icons, right? And those icon is called launcher icon. And you can define it here in map. So yeah, let's see it. For example, if you open this one, we see this one, right? And it's defined, and it will match this one. So this one, I forgot name. So all of them are defined here. Yeah, and the values. So yeah, let's see examples. Resource IDs. Each resource has an ID to access it, and when naming resources, it's always better to use lowercase letters. It's like kind of convention. And Android, to use those resources from your code or from your activity, you need to use R class, which is automatically generated by Android, and you can reference all of your resources. And yeah, here the syntax of getting them. Well, let's see a couple of them. So activity main. Let's open our main activity, and so here's one example, right? We have a layout file called activity main, and to access it, so it's located under layout folder. So resources, layout, and activity main. So we need r.layout.activity main, right? And we have, for example, drawable called icon launcher background. To access it, we need r drawable dot icon launcher background, right? But we can set it at content view. We can use it as background for some image view. Later we will use it. Yeah, we can also access, for example, values. Let's say we have a string called app name. We can access using it by string and app name, and so on. Okay, let's continue. And each view also can have ID attribute, and we can define it here. For example, let's define it ID hello world. Let's call it hello world, or title. Let's call it title. And we can access this view by using its ID and by typing ID. We can use this reference to perform some operations on that view. Let's call it like text view is equal to find view. There is a nice method called find view by ID, and we can access it. Right? Also, we need to specify its type. Text view. Yeah, and we can perform operations on that, like text is equal to, we can like update its text, right? So for example, updated, and when we run our app, its text will be updated, not hello world, and so on. The ID is used to access it. Yeah, recommendation is better to use specific IDs to like unique IDs to each view. Әрқайсысына жеке-жеке бөлек-бөлек ID қолданған дұрыс. Yeah, let's talk about activities in detail. So activity is like kind of entry point to your app, right? For example, before we use it in Kotlin, for example, in IntelliJ IDEA, we use it main method. Main method will be executed firstly when you launch your app. In Android world, we use activities. So activities are kind of entry points. When user, for example, when user taps on your app, this activity will be created and this method will be called. So it's kind of entry point. Also it's defines like it acts like a holder for your UI. So то есть он как контейнер, да, для вашего UI. Ну, то есть вы тут UI укажете и передаете его activity, используя этот метод, и он покажет вам. Yeah, and its official definition, it sounds like that. Like activity is one of Android components which is responsible for displaying UI or something like that. But better to understand it, right? So it's one of component which is designed for UI. So here how it looks like. Let's see another example of deep hierarchy. So app-compat activity, it extends fragment activity, it extends component activity, and this extends another component activity, and finally this extends activity, right? So we can say that our main activity is like child of activity. That's why we say activity. So here's a basic life cycle of activity. We will cover complex life cycle in next lessons. So when activity is launched, yeah, I think that I have said about that, right? So when it's destroyed, right? When it's shut down. When you, for example, do this, it will be shut down. So it's destroyed now. And when you open, on create method will be called again, right? But if you do like this, not to like swipe away it will still exist. But at some time, system might decide that better to kill it because it might need some additional resources, right? For example, if you open some like really heavy some game, for example, and if Android needs RAM, it can automatically close it, right? So in that case, activity will be also killed. Yeah. So onCreate method is method of its parent. You can see it here. In fragment activity, it's defined. And here we are just overriding it, right? But important thing is to call super.onCreate to like... то есть вот это нужно всегда вызвать, потому что он делает важные, тоже важные такие вещи, да? Потом они будут нужны. Да, надеюсь, вы поняли, что вот этот UI показывается благодаря этому методу. И это считается обязательным тоже. Есть activity, которые... there are some activities which doesn't call this method, but they are like very special cases. So yeah, let's talk about layout inflation. what's happening here, right? Why is this UI is being displayed? This is called layout inflation. So the layout XML file is parsed by a class called layout inflator, and a hierarchy of view objects is created to be displayed inside an activity. And this process is called layout inflation. То есть мынаны берген затымыз мына XML файл layout inflator деген класс арқылы парс жасалады да, и ол мынандай бізге структура құрып береді. То есть Java класстарының там объекттердің структурасын құрып береді. И соны алады да activity-ға береді ше. Бұны көру үшін былай бөлек істесе де болады негізі. Допустим, val view да is equal to layout inflator inflate from меха context деген зат береді здесь-то. И мында inflate и мында ресурс береді. В общем, мында кажется null берсе болады ғой. Естіп алып мына view'ды мына ішіне беріп жіберсе болады типа. Примерно осылай жол бар тағы істеудің. Бірақ set content view дегенде, ол set content view'дің ішінде осыны автоматом істейді. Былай барып кодын тоже көрсе болады. Былай бәріне барып қарай. В общем, inflation деген осы зат. То есть мына біздің XML-да жазған затымыз, when we define something here, it will be converted to Java classes, right? Java objects. Yeah, let's talk about making our app interactive. And this is, I think, before that was boring part, now interesting starts happening. Yeah, let's modify our app to respond. Let's add one button and tap on that. Within main activity, yeah, I have shown it, right? I just also find it with find view by ID, and we changed the text. But let's do it when we click on some button. Yeah, let's show it initially, and then we can see this lecture. Let's define button. Let's use linear layout instead of frame layout, and define its orientation as vertical, its height as match parent, and we need one text view and one button. Which text will be first called tab me, right? And text is vlastno hello world bolsun и and we need to assign IDs, right, to access it. Let's assign some button ID, like button. But in real life, better to use meaningful names. So for this example, I just using button, and let's access it. Button extends button. Which is equal to find view by ID RID button. And yeah, as we said earlier, views is kind of rectangular area, and it can represent some view, so it can be like some UI, right? Also, it can deliver some events. So for example, when user interacts on view, when user, for example, like hovers or clicks on that, it can deliver those events to us. To do so, we need to add some listeners. Like for example, here we will use a click listener. Set on click listener. which adds listener to that button. And when that button is clicked, this code will be triggered. As you see here, we are using, I think it's Lambda function, right? Let's see code. Yeah, it's receiving a listener, and we can pass it as Lambda because this listener, this interface has only one method. That's why we can use Lambda. So let's move this code here. But better to do this one because this code, like find view by ID, is also it has some cost, right? It requires time to find that view. Under the hood, I think it uses like graph search. How is it called? Deep first search or depth first search or breadth first search, something like that, and it will take some time. That's why it's better to find it earlier while onCreate method is created and use them later, right? Instead of finding it each time when button is clicked. And let's update its text to update. And let's run our app. Что-то не то. Okay, button. We use it. Japan. Me. Прикольно. I guess we need to, yeah, got it. So we are using here match parent, and this view is taking whole space, right? It's just taking whole space, and button it's like going out, right? То есть батонға орын қалмай қалып жатыр да, ол астына кетіп қалып жатыр. Сол үшін батонды көре алмай жатыр. Сол үшін бізге мына жерде wrap контент қолдану керек болады. And here is our button. It's also trying to take whole space, right? Let's update it too. And yeah, and let's run it again. So when we tap on this button, text will be updated. Yeah, so in Vue we can view Fire's events, and we can subscribe to these events, right? We can, by default, they are ignored, and if we register some callback, like we did using set on click listener, right? We can receive that events. There are lots of events. There are touch events. There are like Vue has lots of events. And here's an example what we have did here. It uses another way. So if you notice, it's passing not lambda, it's passing this, right? And yeah, we can use that too. Let's see it. On click listener, we can implement here this interface, and so it's arguing that we need to implement it. We can click like Ctrl I and implement it, and here we can update that text view, right? Yeah, we can't access that text view, right? Because this is a function, and the text view is not property of the class, right? To access it, it should be property of the class. But if we do so, this will also cause error, because this code will be executed when we create main activity class, right? But we need it to be executed when create method is called, right? That's why this will cause also error. To fix that, we can use something called bylazy, so that it will be executed when we request it. So for example, here we are requesting it, and if we use bylazy, it will be executed here. So when we reach this one, but this can contain bugs, so better to not use it. So later we will cover it, I think, in like memory leaks. We have something called memory leaks, and this can cause memory leaks. So better not to use that version. We can use var and something called late init var, and we can postpone, like postpone its initialization logic. We can just declare it here, and here we can initialize it. Text u is equal to this one, right? And yeah, so here we initialized it, and here instead of passing lambda, we can pass this, which is main activity that implements onClick listener. If it doesn't implement onClick listener, this will cause an error. So it will argue that it needs something that implements view onClick listener but got main activity, right? That's why we need to implement onClick listener. So yeah, and let's run it. So we see that text is updated. Yeah, so it's called, by the way, interface that which has only one method is called single abstract method. So in such cases, we can use lambdas, or we can use like something like that, which like object extends runnable, but try to don't use it. So this use it when interface has multiple methods, but when an interface has one method, lambda is fine. So yeah, here's an example. As you know, in Kotlin, we can move out this lambda to out of this like brackets, and we can remove these brackets as we did. So yeah, here what I have said. So this is called like late init var, да? То есть мы можем тут просто показать и его потом инициализировать его. И тут вроде, давайте я найду, что-то было полезно или нет. Да, тут просто говорится про это, то есть про late init. Да, вот то, что мы использовали, этот property. Yeah, and let's talk about Gradle. Gradle uses directed acyclic graph. If you don't know what is it, no problem. To determine which tasks are required for our intention and what is the order to run them and runs them. So Gradle is a build system. It has tasks, series of tasks. And for example, to build our app, it might need to run several tasks. So we can see here, for example, to build our app, it ran all of these tasks, right? And just to get some sense, for example, firstly, it can compile our Kotlin code to bytecode, right? Then it can include, no. Firstly, I think it will compile all of these resources to some like APK suitable format, right? At the end, we will get APK and install it on device, right? But to get APK, we need to include all of these resources inside that APK. And we need to also include our code in that APK too, right? To do that, we need to compile it, and all of these steps are defined in Gradle. And when we click on Run, under the hood, Gradle runs all of the tasks, and it generates output as APK, and it also installs that APK into our app. So Gradle handles all of the tasks, and in practice, you will see very often Gradle errors. If you see them, you need to like copy that error and search it from Google. And if you like spend 10 minutes without finding anything, it's okay to ask from me. So just come to me and ask. I will probably find its cause. Yeah, by the way, one example is this one. So instant weather, I run it and I faced another error. And what I do is I also copy that and search from Google, right? Yeah. Yeah, it can also manage third-party dependencies. То есть давайте посмотрим просто один скрипт. Тут build Gradle. So yeah, let's see the script. And here we'll see that our application by default using these libraries, which is material and constraint layout and like app-compat and so on. And these are called dependencies. And Gradle can manage them, right? Gradle can download them and or update them if their version is updated like 2 and so on. Yeah, Gradle has also plugins. If we see here, we are defining plugins here. For example, if we don't define this plugin, we will not be able to use this keyword, which is Android, and specify versions. Gradle is generic. Gradle is not tied to only Android. With Gradle, you can build any system. So you can build Java applications or other applications and so on. So to make it understand Android, we need to use Android application plugin and Kotlin plugin to make it like Kotlin suitable, right? So these are called plugins. Oh, by the way, time is over. Yeah. So let's see. Yeah, here dependencies, plugins, and so on. So I think your homework will be. Let's open this one. And, yeah, you can optionally do this homework at home. You can complete like download step, run your first Android app step, and so on, because these remaining topics are not so important. So I think they are not required to complete your homework. Let's see. This one, and let's see this one. Yeah, they are not required. Yeah, so let's make this homework also like required, right? Mandatory. So you have 2 homeworks, lesson 3 and the lesson 4. You also need to use Git commits to track your progress. I've explained it in channel. So yeah, thank you for attending. See you next time. If you have questions, you can ask.